Namaskar. Hi, Michael. Hi, Ernesto. Hi, José. Today we have a question that says like this. Bhagavan talks in many verses about the final annihilation of ego, whereas in other fragments or verses, such as in Arunachala Aksharamanamalai or in sub-fragments of Nan Yar, he describes some of the difficulties we may come across on this path with which we naturally feel identified. For example, if instead of lamenting and weeping, oh, I'm a sinner, how can I be saved? Or is it possible to dissolve so many vasanas, etc.? How does Bhagavan know about the difficulties of the jiva on the path with such detail?
How does Bhagavan know this? Well, the simple answer is we cannot understand the state of Bhagavan with our mind, but we can give some sort of answer. Firstly, we could say, because Bhagavan has been through all this himself. That is, if we take Bhagavan to be the one who had done so much tapas or vichara before this lifetime, but he was fully ripe and ready in this lifetime. But that's taking Bhagavan to be the jiva. That jiva died on that day in, or that jiva means ego, was annihilated on that day when that fear of death came to him and he turned his attention within. So what Bhagavan actually is not the person he seems to be. He is our own real nature. As our own real nature, he knows us and everything about us, but not as we know ourselves. In his view, we are nothing other than himself. So by knowing himself, he knows us and everything else. But we cannot, because he doesn't see anything other than himself, his experience is an experience of perfect oneness. So with our minds, we cannot understand how then does he seem to know all this multiplicity? How does he know about the difficulties of the jiva and so on? In a certain sense, he doesn't know any of this. He knows just I am. But in knowing I am, he's knowing the reality of ego and all its problems. So, yeah, with our mind, we can't and we need not comprehend these things. All we need to understand is, from our perspective, he seems to know all these things.
I think that is like Bhagavan know perfectly the state of our mind. For example, no, when in some tales about the devotees, some devotees that came to Arunachala and stayed with Bhagavan and said that recently, or suddenly, sorry, they feel that Bhagavan knows exactly what it happened in himself, no, in these persons, no, in these devotees, no.
Yeah.
It's like what you said so many times about the verse of Nan Yar about the sun, no. This absolutely intelligence that is inside, or that this is the I am consciousness, when give the light for the light of the mind, this intelligence is in it, and when illuminates something, know perfectly what is illuminating, no? And in this question said there is not very particularly questions, particularly things. Sorry, I'm a sinner. All of that is mental fabrications of pain, of suffering, no? And Bhagavan knows perfectly the distortion of the mind, and for that, the grace came to save us. No?
Yes, that is all true from our perspective.
Yes, only.
But from his perspective is quite different. So that's why I say we cannot understand his state in in verse in Ulutunapadu. Bhagavan says, I'll just get the verse. I think it's verse 31. He says, for those who are happiness composed of that, which rose destroying themselves, what one thing exists for doing? They do not know anything other than themselves. Who can conceive their state as like this? So in Bhagavan's view, there is nothing other than himself. And he himself is one and indivisible. So he doesn't know all the details that we know, but he knows the reality of all the details.
Yes.
So trying to understand, I mean, it's useful to understand these things to the extent to recognize why we cannot fully comprehend this, why we can never fully comprehend this. If we want to understand Bhagavan's state, we need to be in that state, because he knows himself just by being himself. And in knowing himself, he knows everything, because he is the only thing there is. He's the reality of all appearances.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Bhagavan knows us far better than we know ourselves, because whereas we know ourselves as a person, he knows us as we actually are.
Mm-hmm. The grace of Bhagavan,
Yes.
In the form of the light of awareness,
Yes.
our consciousness,
Yes.
including in Chidavasa, in this light, the form, no?
Yes.
But the essence of the sense of the quality of this light is in Chit. No?
Yes. Yes.
And Chit is mixed with the Upadis, but conserve the essence. No?
Yes. Chit is mixed with upadis from our perspective.
Yes.
From his perspective, Chit is ever in its pure condition.
Correct. But when we are illuminating our mind,
yes,
in our perspective as ego,
yes,
Bhagavan is in us.
Yes, yes.
And when we are knowing our suffering, from our perspective as ego,
yes.
the light of Chit is knowing
yes,
our suffering, no?
Yes.
It's how I feel.
Yes. But it's all we have to remember. This is all from our perspective.
Yes.
Can I say something, Michael?
Yes, certainly.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So when we come to Bhagavan, because we have a situation, and this is we have a problem.
Yeah.
The problem we present to Bhagavan is we're in bondage.
Yes.
The immediate answer from Bhagavan is you're not in bondage. Your true nature is ever infinite happiness.
Yes.
We say, Bhagavan, this is not my experience.
Yes.
By saying that, we already said no to his first line of teaching.
Yes.
Put that aside. So Bhagavan puts his first line of teaching aside, brings his second line of teaching, whose only purpose is to bring our attention within.
Yes.
To prove that his first line of teaching was the truth.
Exactly. That is Bhagavan. In Bhagavan's view, there's no ego, no Maya, no body, no world, nothing. There's no problem whatsoever. But in our perspective, from our perspective as ego, we as ego are a big problem. And this ego is the root of all other problems. So Bhagavan comes down to our level, so to speak, in giving us teachings, he has taught us in all his various writings. He is accepting, he is talking as if from our perspective. If Bhagavan were to say there is no problem and to leave it at that, how would that help us? It wouldn't help us. He tells us ultimately there is no problem. The problem lies in your not recognizing the truth. Not recognizing the truth means not recognizing the truth of your own nature, what you actually are. If you say you're in bondage, see yourself and see whether you're actually in bondage. The reason you seem to be in bondage is because you're not looking at yourself. You're looking only at other things. If you look at yourself, you'll find that you're ever free. So Bhagavan has to seemingly concede that there is a problem in order to show us the solution to the problem. And the solution to the problem is to see that there never was any problem in the first place. So as you say, he comes back, his basic teaching is, what is alone is as it is, no problem. Because we cannot see that, he concedes that there is a problem, as if there's a problem, namely, and he diagnoses what is that problem. When we look outwards, we see so many problems, but Bhagavan goes to the root of all these problems. All these problems appear in whose view? In the view of ego. So ego is the root of all other problems, because in the absence of ego, there are no problems. Problems exist only in the view of ego. So Bhagavan's teachings are extremely useful to us because he's pointing us directly back at what is the root cause of the problem and what is the solution. The root cause is our mistaken awareness of ourself as I am this person, I am this jiva, I am this body. The solution is to see, who am I? What am I? If we see what we actually are, then we will know that we were never the body. There never was a jiva or ego who rose to experience itself as I am this body. So Bhagavan's teachings are so neat. He points out what is the problem and what is the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is seeing that actually there never was a problem. Because the problem seems to exist only in the view of ego. And ego seems to exist only because instead of looking at ourselves, we're looking at all the other things. So if instead of looking at the problems, you look at the root of the problems, we find there's no root and therefore no problems.
And also because of in this, we have to concede that there is a problem, as José said.
Yes.
Bhagavan has to present himself here in this dream with us in a form.
Yes.
Just like in the same way that the dream food soothes the dream hunger.
Yes.
Dream teachings eradicate the dream ego. I mean,
Bhagavan and his teachings, they are the dream food that will satisfy our hunger for happiness, because he turns our attention. He and his teachings, their function is to turn our attention back to ourselves. When our attention is turned back to ourselves, then we see there never was a problem in the first place. But merely saying, if we just say, oh, there's no problem, that's not the solution to the problem, because who is saying there's no problem? It's we as ego. This ego is the problem. So we need to understand, firstly, the Bhagavan teachings are very, very simple, but also they are not, Bhagavan isn't trivializing our problem. He's not saying, all you have to do is to see what you actually are. He's not saying that in a blasé way. He's saying that because that is the solution. But seeing what we actually are though it is actually the easiest of all things, it seems to us to be very difficult. Why? Because of our Vishaya vasanas, because we have so much liking to go outwards, we are unwilling to turn within. So though he made it clear this is very, very easy, he also acknowledged that there are problems. The problems are in the form of our vasanas, our inclination or liking to go outwards. And the solution to that is the same solution to the solution of the root problem, ego, namely seeing what we actually are.
The clue here is when you say that Bhagavan concede, no?
Yes.
That we seems to exist.
Yes.
For me, this word is absolutely precious.
Yes. Yes.
Seems to exist. It's a concession, but with a condition, no?
Yeah.
Only seems.
Yep.
Seems very real for you.
It seems extremely real.
Extremely real.
Yeah.
But only it seems.
What is more obvious than the fact that I'm this body? I'm not this. I'm not this microphone. I'm not any of these objects here. I am this. It's so obvious. It's so real for us. Yet it is all false.
And we have a very, very big compromise with this illusion.
Yes.
And to give another example of in Arunachala Aksharamanamalai, verse 11, when he talks about vasanas, he says, Arunachala, when the 5 sense thieves, with their explanation, namely Vishaya vasanas, which are the seeds that sprout as desires for the pleasures that are seemingly derived from the 5 kinds of sense objects, when the 5 sense thieves enter my heart, are you not in my heart? In that sense, when Bhagavan says this verse, he's putting himself in the skin of an aspirant who doesn't, obviously, who doesn't know.
Yes. But the important point there is he's constantly drawing us back, drawing our attention. If Arunachala is in my heart, then why am I worrying about these 5 sense thieves? So he's pointing our attention back to ourselves. Because the 5 sense thieves are a problem only when we're looking outwards. If we look within, he's ever shining there as our own being. So since he is what we actually are, there never is any problem. The problem seems to exist. The 5 sense thieves are a big problem, so long as we look away from ourselves. The solution is to look at ourselves, to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So in so many ways, Bhagavan is constantly drawing our attention back within.
And just like you said with the, yes, I'm the body, I think, obviously, no? Yes, who doubt that I'm the body? Then the problem is out there, who can doubt it? The problem is death, the problem is...
we can and should doubt it, but however much we doubt it, it's still so real to us. It seems so real.
Doubt is the beginning, just the beginning.
That's the beginning. Because we merely by reasoning or by doubting, we cannot free ourselves from this very, very dense delusion, I am this body. But we can very easily free ourselves from this simply by looking within. But we must be willing to look within. That is where the problem lies. Bhagavan has given us a very simple solution, but because we are unwilling to surrender, we're not yet willing to surrender ourselves. We therefore are not willing to look within, because if we look within, as this question began, annihilation of ego. That's what the teachings are all about, the annihilation of ego. But in order to annihilate ego, we must be willing to be annihilated.
I remember in his history of Hafiz, more or less I remember when he say that one person is looking to find the key of his house.
Yes.
In the exterior of the house, no?
Yes.
And he has the key in his hand,
Yes.
and in the same hand the light, no? What
Yes.
is to illuminate, no?
Yeah.
Only need to open the hand,
Yeah.
and fine here.
Yes.
But in the illusion, you are all the time convinced
Yeah. Yeah.
that
We're
the
looking
key
away
is
from
outside
ourselves.
of you. Yes. And is the most simple is open the mind,
Yes.
open
Yes.
the hand.
Yes.
But you think that you need to change the to become to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, even when Bhagavan tells us that this waking state is just like the dream state, even we still feel that in any way this is more real, a bit more real than dream from this point of view.
Yes. Yes.
It's inevitable. Yeah, and why, Michael, is Vishaya
But
Vasana?
not only does this state seem to be more real than dream now, when we're in dream, that dream state seems to be more real than dream. Because in dream, we know about dreams. And if we talk about dreams yes, those dreams are just mental fabrication, but this state is the real state. That's how it always seems to us while we are dreaming, but the dream is the real state, the waking state.
Even though we know that we're going to fall asleep and we're going to dream, and we cannot say, okay, it's the same thing every night.
Yes.
I'm going to see the behind the curtain, but no.
Yes.
Michael, yesterday I was discussing with a friend about the perspective of the traditional Advaita about Anandamaya Kosha. Sorry for the change of the topic.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
In this view that is contradictory with Bhagavan teachings, when they said the Advaita traditional vision that Anandamaya Kosha is a state of ignorance, no?
Yes.
Bhagavan said the opposite.
Yes, yes.
It is not a state of ignorance.
Yes.
Can you profound a little more about this?
Right. Well,
why begin to? I don't know if it was Gaudapada or who was begin to this vision.
Well, the thing is, we talk about traditional or classical Advaita, but actually there have always been many different levels of explanation. The level of explanation is given according to the grasping power of the audience. So, for example, Adi Shankara wrote commentaries on the Prasthanatraya, the major Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. Many of the explanations he gave are not the deepest explanations, but he was writing those commentaries for a particular audience, for an audience of those who had much faith in those texts and who interpreted those texts otherwise. So he had to know what these texts mean. He had to argue a different interpretation, but he had to argue. There's no use if you're having a discussion with someone and you're trying to help them to understand, if you say things that are too deep for them to grasp, you're not going to convince them. So he had to come down to their level and give explanations that were suited to their level of understanding. Even Bhagavan, we can see, that is in his own writings, in Ulladu Napadu and other writings, he has given the very deepest explanation. But often when people came to him and asked questions, he presented his teachings in a more diluted way, because that was when he's answering someone's question, he has to answer in a way that is suitable that will suit their power of grasping. So, yes, there are many different interpretations of about sleep, about Anandamaya Kosha. Does Anandamaya Kosha still exist in sleep? And so on. Generally, the most popular explanations accept, but Anandamaya kosha remains in sleep. But that is an unsatisfactory explanation for various reasons. If the Anandamaya kosha exists in sleep, it also must exist in waking and dream. So what evidence do we have that the Anandamaya kosha is not what we actually are? So the whole point of the analysis of the three states is to recognize that in sleep there is nothing other than ourself, nothing other than our own being. Then only can we arrive at the conclusion that we are not any of these five sheaves. We are not any phenomenon of any kind whatsoever. Why? Because no phenomenon exists in sleep. Even ego, we are not, because ego doesn't exist in sleep. So if we make a concession to people to satisfy those who want to say, how, if everything is absent in sleep, how does it all reappear in the waking state? For people who ask such questions, it has to be said, though everything disappears in sleep, it remains in seed form. In the seeds of the vasanas that make up the Anandamaya kosha. So Anandamaya kosha does remain in sleep. This is an explanation that is suited to people of a certain level of understanding. But that explanation undermines the very purpose of this analysis of the three states. The purpose of analyzing the three states is to understand that we are not anything that does not exist in sleep, that we are not aware of in sleep. What are we aware of in sleep? We are aware only of our being. So why should we say that something exists in sleep that we are not aware of? Just because we are aware of something, it doesn't mean that it exists. But to say that it exists even when we're not aware of it is missing the point. But such explanations are appropriate to people at a certain level of understanding. If they question deeper, then if such is the case, if the Anandamaya kosha exists in sleep, then why do you say the Anandamaya kosha is not myself? What evidence is there in my experience that the Anandamaya kosha is not myself? There's no evidence. If you assume that the Anandamaya kosha remains in sleep, then you have no reason to suppose that you're anything other than the Anandamaya kosha. So that is why manana is so important. Yes. Different explanations are given to suit people at different levels. We are not to take all these explanations at face value. We need to think deeply about it and recognize where there are contradictions in the explanations that are given, and then try to find out which is a deeper explanation. The deeper explanations have been given by Bhagavan, but Bhagavan says clearly, for example, in the first sentence of Nan Yar, he uses the term manamatra nidrail. That means in sleep, which is devoid of mind. If it's devoid of mind, since everything else exists in the view of mind, the mind here implies ego. So in the absence of ego, how can there be anything else? Likewise, in verse 21 of Upadesha Undiyar, the one verse in which he says that, referring to what was said in the previous verse, that one thing that appeared as I am I, which is the infinite whole, that is always the true import of the word I, because of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, which is devoid of I. Devoid of I there means,
free of mind.
Obviously, I exist in sleep. Devoid of I there means devoid of ego. We exist in the absence of ego in sleep. If ego is absent, how can there be anything else? Because all other things exist in the view of ego. If we say, oh, no, ego is absent, but the Anandamaya kosha is still there, then we are saying that Anandamaya kosha exists independent of ego. Then in whose view does it exist? If it doesn't exist in the view of ego, then it must exist in the view of our real nature, which is absurd. Obviously, in the view of our real nature, there's no Anandamaya kosha. So we shouldn't take all explanations at face value. We need to be willing to think deeply about it, to think critically about it, because different explanations, ultimately no explanations are true, because the truth is ekam eva advaitium. There's one only without a second. So there's nothing to explain. No one to whom to explain it, and no one to explain it. So, but explanations are given for the sake of ourself as ego. In the view of ego, there's not just one, there are many. So explanations are given for this ego. But which explanations are most useful? The most useful, the most practical explanations are those given by Bhagavan. Because ultimately, what is the aim of all these explanations? How do these explanations help us if they don't enable us to know what we actually are? So the aim of all our endeavors, the aim of all our sravana, manana, nididhyasana is to know what we actually are. So which explanations will be most useful to help us to know what we actually are? Those are the explanations we should accept. Other explanations, they may have been given. They may be given in so many sacred texts. They may have been given by Gaudapada or by Shankara or even by Bhagavan. That doesn't mean they're the correct explanation. They're the explanation. Those other explanations were suitable for other people in other state of mind. For example, Bhagavan in Ulladu Bandam, in that verse where he talks about the sanchita, that is agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha existing, whether they exist or not for Vijnani, Bhagavan says the explanation that sanchita and agamya and sanchita cease, but prarabdha remains for Vijnani, is a reply given to the questions of others. He refers to the word, he used the word others there. And then he tells what is the truth. When a widow dies, when a husband dies, all three wives become widowed. Now, you can't have two widows and one wife remains unwidowed. No, they're all widowed. Likewise, when ego, the doer, and the doer of actions and the experience of the fruit, when ego dies, all the three karmas cease to exist. So, but those explanations, but prarabdha remains for Vijnani, it's given in Shankara's commentary. Shankara himself has given these explanations. Are we to infer, oh, Shankara didn't know what he was talking about, he didn't understand these things? No, of course, Shankara knew what he was talking about, but he was giving such explanation because, as Bhagavan said, it was a reply given to the questions of others. Others means those who are not yet ready to commit themselves to this path.
And when this line of people say that the darkness associate the darkness not only to the deep sleep,
yes,
to the Anandamaya Kosha,
yes,
and to the big sleep, to both, no?
Yeah.
And when they associate darkness to Anandamaya Kosha,
yes,
is for the idea that the Sanchita karma is absolutely impossible to know what are there, no? Because it's very, 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 very big, and too many lives. And for that is like an unconsciousness in the psychology, Occidental psychology. And what I don't understand very, very clear is why associate these Advaitic lines, the darkness, to the deep sleep, if in the deep sleep is the light of consciousness knowing itself.
But Bhagavan doesn't accept that sleep is a state of darkness. He points out the obvious truth, it's a state of light. Because what are we ignorant of in sleep? We're only ignorant of the body and world and so on, which are not real anyway. So that's not darkness. But the Anandamaya kosha, which Bhagavan doesn't concede exists in sleep, he does refer to the Anandamaya kosha as darkness. In verse 22 of Upadeshundya, he refers to the Anandamaya kosha as irul. Irul means darkness. And I think in the Sanskrit version, he refers to it as tamas, which means darkness. That doesn't mean the darkness of ignorance. What it means is the darkness of desire. That is, the fundamental darkness is the darkness of ignorance. That is ego. And because of that fundamental darkness of self-ignorance, there a secondary darkness appears, namely the darkness of desires. Why are desires called darkness? Because they cloud our mind. They draw our mind outward. So long as our mind is going outward, we're not turning within to see the light within. Mm-hmm. So when Bhagavan talks about using the term irul, darkness, to refer to the Anandamaya kosha, it would be wrong to infer that he means by irul, he means the darkness of ignorance. Because the darkness of ignorance is not at one of the five sheaves. The darkness of ignorance is ego itself. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
So all these things, we need to think deeply about these things, and we need to think independently. If we think, oh, but Shankara has said that prarabdha exists for the jnani, therefore it must be true. Therefore, how can Bhagavan say it's not true? Bhagavan says why Shankara said so. It's a reply to questions of others. So just because things have been said by Gaudapada or by Shankara or even by Bhagavan, we shouldn't necessarily accept them as true. Because Bhagavan may have said certain things, but he may have said opposite things at other times. Because they're different levels of explanation. But the deeper explanations are the explanations that he gives us in works like Uladunapadu, Upadeshundya, Nana, and implicitly in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. In so many, I mean, some places he's very explicit with his teachings in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, but even where he's not explicit with his teachings, the teachings are implicit there.
And going back to Vishaya Vasanas, Michael, our tendencies to seek happiness outside ourselves, yes?
Yes.
Why does it seem that sometimes it seems that we are trying to find pain, or by thinking of things which are, I don't know, like bad memories, or even to rejoice in feeling guilty for something we did, or something? It seems like sometimes we're quite looking for quite the opposite.
Because we wrongly believe our happiness is dependent on external things, our unhappiness is also dependent on them. So if we think something is making us unhappy, we think about it trying to solve the problem. For example, supposing this month I don't have enough money to pay my rent.
Yeah.
Why do I think about that problem? Obviously, thinking about that problem is not going to make me happy. It's going to make me unhappy. The more I think about it, the more worried I'm going to get. Am I going to be evicted or what? But because we're so worried about that, our mind keeps on coming back to that problem, hoping to find some solution to that problem. So once we start to look for happiness outside ourselves, we are both trying to find things that will make us happy and trying to avoid the things that will make us unhappy. So we are preoccupied not only with the objects of our desire, but also with the objects of our dislikes, the objects of our aversion, the things that we are trying to avoid. We are thinking about both things. And obviously thinking about both things is not going to make us happy. It's going to make us very unhappy. Mm-hmm. This is Maya. Yeah. But the problem is the same in both cases, whether you're thinking about the things which you think are going to make you happy or the things that are making you unhappy. in both cases, there's a fundamental lack of viveka. That is, you mistake the external things as the causes of your happiness and your unhappiness. Whereas Bhagavan says, you yourself are infinite happiness. Nothing can make you unhappy. The unhappiness is caused simply by your allowing your mind to go away from yourself, so you fail to recognize the infinite happiness that you actually are. That's one explanation. Another explanation, these are not two contradictory explanations, but they're just explanations from different perspectives. As ego, we depend for our semi-existence on our awareness of things other than ourselves. So even if the other things are causing us misery, we would prefer to be thinking about those things that are making us miserable than letting go of all things and turning within. Because turning within, we ourselves were going to die. So we would prefer to live in misery than to surrender ourselves and die. That means ego die. See, consider all the souls who are in hell. Hell doesn't necessarily mean a world, but if we do bad karmas, we will be in a hell-like condition. Think of all the people who were, for example, in Nazi concentration camps. That was hell on earth. But in spite of being in such a condition, if we were in such a condition, would we be ready to turn within and surrender ourselves? If we're not ready to surrender ourselves now, we wouldn't be ready to surrender ourselves even under such circumstances.
Nazis feels, no? Is like that, but without the paper of the gift, or the gift of the Christmas, no? Of this Occidental life, no?
Yes.
It's like a paper of a gift of Christmas.
Yes.
And inside, as Brahma said, is a sweet with in the profound of the sweet are the poison.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically,
can I mention something? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So basically, it's like, even though by constant worrying, like when you have some problem in your mind, you're worrying constantly. It's like, and going outwards and thinking about in circles, like a vicious circle. You think that somehow that is going to disappear or something. Yes.
There's also another element here in this. But worrying is a type of identification. Why are you worrying? Because I have so many problems. My life is full of problems. I have to worry about them. We are identifying ourselves with a certain role. I am a person with so many problems. I am a person with so many worries. I'm so stressed. All this is a type of identification, and that identification is what is keeping this ego alive. So even though it's not a very happy identification to be worrying and miserable and everything, or to be stressed, or to be still we hold on to that identity rather than surrendering ourselves.
But I was going to say that we are talking about extreme cases where we have problems. But I live in LA, and I work next to Beverly Hills, and I have myself witnessed the deepest miseries, and among people who live in Beverly Hills, and and not long ago we encountered someone who was incredibly rich, but this person was telling us that she can't find her daughter because her daughter is just roaming in the streets as a homeless person because she just lost it. Her mind just didn't actually make it through all that wealth in the right way. So
Yeah.
it is some eerie thing, this mind.
Yes, yes.
So it's preferable, yeah, to have an identity rather than nothing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Because-
live in misery, but at least live somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And another thing, why we continue grasping things other than ourselves, even though they're causing us misery, we are always under the mistaken, we always have the mistaken belief, but we're going, sooner or later, I may not be happy now. These things may not be giving me happiness, but one day I'll be happy. I may be very poor now, but one day I'll be rich. I may be very sick now. One day I'll be healthy. We're always deluding ourselves, but our present situation is only for now. Then it'll be better. When I have more money, then I'll be happy. When I have more health, then I'll be happy. So we cling on to the unhealthy body in the hopes that one day we'll be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very typical to think like this, because I remember when I was having chronic pains some years ago, and I was convincing myself that I couldn't self-investigate myself with this condition, and I was thinking this has to disappear somehow in order for me to be able to stay within. But then now that I'm feeling better in that regard, it's like, but that was a way of seeking happiness outside myself. When this condition goes, then my mind will continue go on without pain, and I won't turn within after that. Yeah, so it's a delusion.
Yes.
Yeah,
and at the same time, the ego knows that he is a false identity, and in this sense of lack, continuously need to grasp forms, identity, nationality, football club, all the time is needing in the need of new forms to grasp, because he feel in himself that is a impostor, no?
Yes. Well, the thing is, though Bhagavan teaches us, but our real nature is infinite happiness, we are not experiencing ourselves as infinite happiness. So we seem to be lacking the happiness we desire. Since we are lacking it, it must be somewhere outside us. So we're always looking outside, because we feel the deficiency in ourselves. But the deficiency in ourselves is caused by our looking outside. Such is the nature of Maya.
It is a thief that breaks into our backyards, take the flowers from our backyards, then goes to the front door, knocks on the door, and sells the flowers to us.
Exactly.